Ryan Foster hated the sound of metal scraping against metal. It reminded him of bad times when he was young. His father worked with metal and machines, and that sound always meant something was broken. Now, sitting alone in his small research station, that same sound meant trouble. He looked up from his desk where rocks and mineral samples waited for him to study them. The scraping sound came again from somewhere in the station. Ryan stood up and grabbed his toolkit from the wall. He knew what the problem was. The outer airlock was broken again. The research station was old. Very old. Some mining company gave it away 15 years ago when they ran out of money. Now, Ryan lived here alone, and things broke all the time. He had to fix everything himself. Ryan walked through the narrow hallways. His boots made loud sounds on the metal floor. The station was not big at all. It had only 6 rooms. There was his bedroom, his lab where he worked, a storage room, a bathroom, a common room, and the airlock chamber. That was his whole home for the next 6 months. He was here to study Theta 7, a small moon that went around a gas giant planet. Nobody cared about this moon. Nobody even gave the planet a name. But Ryan's job was to study the rocks here and write reports about them. The scraping sound came again, louder this time. Ryan walked faster. Then he heard something else. A high sound, almost like crying. He stopped and listened. It was not a machine sound. It sounded like something alive. His first thought was that the air processor was breaking down. But that did not make sense. He checked it yesterday and everything was working fine. Ryan reached the airlock chamber and looked at the door. Ice was forming on the window. That was very wrong. He checked the control panel and felt his stomach drop. The outer door was closed and sealed properly. But the temperature inside the airlock chamber showed minus 70 degrees. Something was in that freezing space between the 2 doors. The crying sound came again. It was clearer now. Definitely not a machine. Ryan's hands moved fast, checking all the readings. The inner door was holding. No air was leaking out. Whatever was in the airlock was not getting inside the station. But it would not survive long in that cold. Ryan pulled up the camera that showed the outside. What he saw made him stop breathing for a moment. 3 small creatures were pressed against the outer door. They had red scales that sparkled with ice. They had wings folded tight against their backs and long tails wrapped around each other for warmth. One of them lifted its head. Ryan saw large golden eyes staring at the camera. They looked right at him, even though the creature could not possibly know he was watching. Dragons. Baby dragons. Real ones. Ryan had read reports about them during his time in the military. The Draenid species lived far away in the outer-reach territories. They were warriors and traders. They could be dangerous if you made them angry, but they did not attack humans without reason. The reports said they looked like reptiles. They could fly. They talked to each other using their minds somehow. But reading about them was different from seeing them. These babies were dying right in front of him. He could see them shaking. They moved slower and slower with each second that passed. Ryan did not think about rules or proper procedures. He hit the emergency override button hard. The inner door opened with a hiss. Hot air from the station rushed out into the frozen airlock. Ryan grabbed an emergency blanket from the wall locker and stepped into the space between the doors. The cold hit him like a punch. His face burned. His lungs hurt with each breath. The air was so cold it felt like breathing knives. Ryan moved as fast as he could. He wrapped the blanket around the 3 small bodies. They were surprisingly light. None of them weighed more than a house cat. Their scales felt like ice against his hands, even through the blanket. Ryan backed into the station quickly and hit the door control. The inner door closed and sealed. He turned the heat up as high as it would go. Warm air poured into the chamber. Ryan sat down on the floor. He still held the bundle of dragons and blanket in his arms. They were not moving. He carefully unwrapped the blanket, afraid of what he would find. The biggest one opened its eyes first. Those golden eyes looked right at Ryan's face. The look in those eyes was intelligent. It understood what was happening. The baby dragon made a small chirping sound and pressed its cold nose against Ryan's hand. The other 2 started moving. Their tiny claws grabbed the blanket as they pulled themselves closer to Ryan. They wanted his body heat. They were so cold. Ryan stayed there for 20 minutes. He just sat and let them warm up. The ice on their scales melted slowly. Their red color became brighter, like rubies. Their breathing got better. The shaking stopped. When they seemed okay, Ryan stood up carefully. He carried them to his bedroom and put them down on his bed. They immediately dug into his blankets, making soft purring sounds. The smallest one looked at him and chirped. Then it crawled out of the blankets and climbed onto his lap. Ryan froze. He did not know what to do. The little dragon curled up on his lap and closed its eyes. It had decided he was safe. Ryan pulled out his data tablet with his free hand. He started searching the station's computer for information about Draenid biology. He found some basic diagrams and notes about what they ate. But there was nothing about taking care of babies. Nothing about how they got here. He looked down at the 3 small creatures sleeping in his blankets and on his lap. They looked peaceful now. Safe. Tomorrow, he would figure out what to do. He would try to contact someone who could help. He would find a way to get them back to their people. But tonight, he would just keep them warm. He would keep them safe. That was all that mattered right now. Ryan gently touched the head of the dragon on his lap. Its scales were warm now. Almost hot. It purred louder and moved closer to him. Ryan smiled and leaned back against his pillows. He was careful not to wake his unexpected guests. Far away in space, a Draenid war fleet got a distress signal. The coordinates matched a human research station. The biosignatures matched 3 missing babies. The matriarch who commanded that fleet decided the human would pay for whatever they had done. But Ryan knew nothing about this. He only knew that 3 babies needed him, and he was not going to let them down. Protein bars were dragon candy. Ryan discovered this on the second morning when the smallest baby dragon tore open his emergency food supply. She scattered protein bars all over the common room floor. She sat in the middle of the mess with chocolate crumbs on her nose, looking very happy with herself. Ryan had started calling them names in his head. The smallest one was Scarlet. The middle one was Ruby. The biggest was Crimson. He knew these were not their real names, but he needed to call them something. Ruby saw her sister with the chocolate bar. She launched herself across the room fast and tackled Scarlet. They rolled around on the floor, fighting over the half-eaten bar. Crimson walked over more carefully. She grabbed a bar in her mouth and took it to a corner before eating it. Ryan had given up trying to keep them in one place. They were too curious. They wanted to explore everything. And they were too smart. Ruby figured out how to open doors on the second day. She just watched which buttons Ryan pressed, and then she remembered. Crimson could climb almost anything. She liked to sit on top of tall equipment. Scarlet followed Ryan everywhere and cried if he closed a door without her. Ryan also learned something surprising. The baby dragons could talk to him, not with words exactly, but with feelings. When Ruby wanted to play, Ryan felt excitement in his mind. He saw pictures of flying. When Crimson was curious about something, he felt her questions. When Scarlet was scared, he felt her fear like pain in his chest. The telepathy surprised him at first. He had read about it in reports, but feeling it was different. It felt natural, like learning to understand a friend over time. The babies could not make complex thoughts yet. Just emotions and simple pictures. But it was enough. Ryan cleaned up the protein bar mess while the dragons ate their breakfast. He had tried feeding them proper food yesterday, but his supplies were freeze-dried meals made for humans. The dragons ate the vegetables politely, but did not seem to like them much. They loved the protein bars, especially the chocolate ones. After breakfast, Ryan tried to do his work. The mineral samples were not going to study themselves. He was already behind schedule. He sat at his desk and pulled up his files. Immediately, Ruby landed on his keyboard. She chirped at him and walked across the keys. She closed 3 important documents by accident. Crimson climbed on top of his monitor. Her tail hung down and swished across the screen. Scarlet climbed onto his chest and would not move. She made comfortable purring sounds that Ryan could feel through his whole body. Work was clearly not happening today. Ryan gave up and decided to check the station systems instead. The baby dragons could follow him around while he made sure everything was working properly. He stood up gently and moved Scarlet to his shoulder. She immediately dug her tiny claws into his shirt for balance. They walked to the environmental control room first. Ryan checked the air processors, water recyclers, and temperature controls. He explained what each system did. He did not expect the babies to understand, but talking to them felt less lonely than working in silence. Ruby was fascinated by the blinking lights on the control panels. Crimson studied everything with careful attention. Scarlet just purred on his shoulder, happy to be near him. In the storage bay, Ruby found a box of spare parts. She decided it made a good nest. She dragged tools and components into a pile and sat on top like a tiny dragon guarding treasure. Ryan let her keep it. The parts were not important anyway. The power generator room was warm. The fusion reactor that powered the station created heat. All three baby dragons immediately perked up and rushed toward the warmth. They pressed against the safety barriers, enjoying the hot air. Dragons apparently liked heat. Ryan sat on the floor and watched them. They were beautiful in a strange way. Their scales shined like jewels. Their eyes were intelligent and curious. Their wings were still too small for flying. Just tiny things that flapped when they got excited. Their tails were long and used for balance. They also wrapped their tails around things they wanted to keep close. Ryan pulled out his data tablet and started taking notes. If he was going to care for these babies, he needed to understand them better. He wrote down their preferred temperature, what foods they liked, their sleep patterns, and how they behaved. Ruby liked exploring and testing limits. She was the first to try new things. She was the bravest. Crimson was more careful. She always watched and thought before acting. She noticed details Ruby missed. Scarlet was the smallest and seemed most connected to Ryan. She got upset when separated from him. She calmed down instantly when back with him. They were not just generic babies. They had personalities. They had preferences. They had their own ways of seeing the world. Ryan found himself smiling as he wrote, noting all their quirks and habits. That afternoon, Ryan tried to figure out where they came from. He checked the station's external sensors. He found something interesting. 2 weeks ago, something passed through the system. The sensors logged it as space debris. It was too small to be a ship but too large to be natural. It was on a path that would have brought it close to Theta 7 before moving on. Maybe it was a container. Maybe an escape pod. Something that dropped 3 baby dragons here before continuing into empty space. Ryan traced the path backward, but could not find where it started. Whatever it was came from deep space, possibly from outside mapped territories. He looked at the baby dragons playing some kind of game. They were chasing each other's tails in circles. How had they survived? How long were they in that container? The questions had no answers. That evening, Ryan made dinner for himself and shared portions with his guests. The babies ate happily, then wanted protein bars for dessert. He gave each of them half a bar and listened to their disappointed chirping when they wanted more. Bedtime was an adventure. Ryan tried to make a nest for them in the corner of his room. He used blankets and his spare clothes to make it comfortable. The babies looked at the nest. They looked at his bed. Then they all climbed onto his bed instead. They climbed onto his chest the moment he lay down. They formed a warm pile of scales and purring that made his whole body vibrate. Ryan stared at the ceiling and thought about his options. He should contact someone, report the babies, arrange for them to go back to their people. But who would he contact? The nearest human outpost was 3 weeks away by ship. The Draenid territories were even farther. And he had no way to ask the dragons where they belonged. For now, the babies were his responsibility. They trusted him. They had bonded with him. They depended on him. He could not just abandon them. Scarlet snuggled closer to his neck. Her warm breath tickled his skin. Ruby sprawled across his chest without caring about his comfort. Crimson curled up by his side with her tail wrapped loosely around his arm. Ryan closed his eyes and relaxed. Tomorrow, he would figure things out. Tonight, 3 baby dragons needed sleep and safety. He could provide both. That would have to be enough. Space folded and unfolded as the red scale war fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. 27 ships appeared in perfect formation around the small research moon. Their hulls were painted in crimson and gold that caught the distant starlight. On the command deck of the flagship, Matriarch Sarah gripped the arms of her throne. Her claws dug into the metal, so hard they left marks. Her babies were down there. Her hatchlings were alone with the human. She was so angry and scared that everyone on the bridge could feel it. Her emotions pressed against their minds like a heavy weight. Sarah was trying to control herself, but fury and fear were a dangerous mix. The sensor officer was a young male named Frost. He worked his controls with shaking hands. Finally, he spoke.
His voice was barely steady.
3 hatchling biosignatures confirmed on the surface station, Matriarch. 1 adult human male. No other life signs detected. Sarah forced herself to breathe slowly. 3 signatures meant 3 living hatchlings. That was good. That was something. But what condition were they in? What had the human done to them? Her oldest son, Brent, stood beside the throne. His wings were spread in an aggressive display. "We should strike immediately," he said. "Every moment we delay puts the hatchlings at greater risk." Sarah wanted to agree. Every instinct screamed at her to go down to that station and tear it apart until she found her children. But she had not survived 17 major battles by letting emotion override strategy. "Tactical assessment," she commanded. The tactical officer was an older female named Dawn. She brought up a holographic display of the research station. Single structure. Minimal defenses. Standard human design. Probably civilian. No weapons detected. The human appears to be alone. Alone. 1 human against an entire war fleet. It might have been funny under different circumstances. But this human had her hatchlings, and that made him the most dangerous creature in the system as far as Sarah was concerned. "What is his status?" Sarah asked. "What is he doing right now?" Frost checked his sensors again. "All 4 biosignatures are in the same location, Matriarch. They appear to be stationary. No signs of struggle or distress." No distress. That was either very good or very bad. Maybe the human was keeping them calm somehow. Maybe they were unconscious. Maybe they were too weak to struggle. The possibilities made Sarah's blood run cold. Brent's tail lashed with impatience. "Mother, we are wasting time. Let me take a boarding team down. We can secure the hatchlings and capture the human within minutes." Sarah considered it. Fast insertion. Overwhelming force. Minimal risk to her people. But maximum risk to the hatchlings if something went wrong.
If the human panicked.
If he had weapons they had not detected. If the station had self-destruct systems. "No," Sarah said. "I will lead this myself. I will not trust anyone else with my children's lives." She stood from her throne. "Brent, select 4 warriors. Combat ready, but non-lethal weapons only. We take the human alive if possible." If possible. That was important. If the human had hurt her babies, if he had done anything to them, alive would not be an option anymore. The boarding craft launched 15 minutes later. Sarah sat in the pilot seat. Her claws danced over controls designed for much smaller hands. Brent and the 4 warriors sat behind her in tense silence. They all knew what was at stake. The matriarch's hatchlings were the future of the pack. Losing them would be devastating on every level. The approach to the station was quick and quiet. Sarah brought the craft alongside the main airlock and started docking procedures. The station systems accepted the connection without resistance. No security protocols. No defensive measures. Just an old civilian station sitting in the middle of nowhere. The airlock cycled open. Sarah was first through. Her massive form filled the narrow corridor. She had to tuck her wings tight against her body to fit. Human architecture was always too small, designed for their tiny frames. The station smelled wrong. Recycled air with undertones of metal and chemicals. Human scent everywhere. And underneath it all, faint but unmistakable, she caught the scent of her hatchlings. They were close. Sarah moved through the corridors with practiced silence, despite her size. The warriors followed in formation with weapons ready. The station was quiet except for the hum of environmental systems. No alarms. No signs of awareness. Either the human did not know they were here, or he did not care. The biosignature readings led them to a door marked as personal quarters. Sarah paused outside and reached out with her mind, trying to sense her hatchlings through the metal. She felt them immediately. 3 small presences. Sleepy and content. Content. Not afraid. Not in pain. Content. That did not make sense unless the human had drugged them somehow. Sarah did not bother with the door controls. She grabbed the panel and ripped it off the wall. Then she forced the door open with brute strength. Metal screeched, and sparks flew. She charged into the room with wings spread wide, ready for anything, and stopped dead. The human sat in a chair against the far wall. He was young, maybe 30 standard years old, with dark hair that stuck up at odd angles. He wore casual clothes, not armor or weapons. His hands were raised in surrender. His expression was more concerned than frightened. But that was not what made Sarah stop. On the human's chest, curled together in a nest of blankets and stolen clothing, 3 small red dragons slept peacefully. Sarah recognized them instantly. Ruby, her bold explorer. Crimson, her careful thinker. Scarlet, her sensitive baby. They were purring, that deep rumbling sound hatchlings only made when they felt completely safe. The human whispered urgently, "Please do not wake them. They just fell asleep 10 minutes ago, and they have been cranky all morning." Sarah stared at him, stared at her sleeping hatchlings on his chest, stared at the makeshift nest that covered half the room, stared at the empty protein bar wrappers scattered on the floor, stared at the data tablet propped on the desk showing notes about hatchling behavior and care. This was not what she expected to find. This was not a human holding hostages or conducting experiments or doing any of the terrible things she had imagined during the journey here. This was a human who had apparently been taking care of her children. Brent pushed into the room behind her with his weapon raised. He saw the scene and hesitated, confusion clear on his face. The other warriors crowded in the doorway, equally uncertain. Sarah stepped closer to the human, studying him carefully. He did not flinch away from her. He did not try to run. He just sat there with her sleeping hatchlings on his chest, looking tired and rumpled, and somehow completely non-threatening. She leaned down and inhaled deeply, drawing his scent into her lungs. Fear, yes, but not the sharp terror of someone caught doing wrong. Just normal caution around a creature much larger and more dangerous than himself. Under the fear was exhaustion and determination, and something else. Something that smelled like pack bond. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Explain yourself, human. Explain why my hatchlings sleep on you, like you are their den mother." The transport ship felt enormous compared to the research station. Ryan wandered the corridors with 3 hatchlings following him like ducklings. He tried not to look overwhelmed by the scale of everything. The ceilings were high enough for dragons to fly inside. The doorways were wide enough for creatures with wingspans measured in meters. Everything was built for a species much larger than humans. Ryan felt like a child exploring a house designed for giants. He had been aboard for 2 days now, and things had not gone smoothly. Ruby discovered the ventilation system on the first night. She got herself stuck in a duct above the weapons bay. It took 3 hours and 4 increasingly frustrated engineers to get her out. She emerged covered in dust and incredibly pleased with herself. The engineers glared at Ryan like this was somehow his fault. Crimson found the training room and accidentally activated a combat simulation. Ryan walked in to find his careful, intelligent hatchling screeching at a holographic enemy fighter. She was trying to breathe fire she did not yet have. The simulation took 20 minutes to shut down because Crimson kept triggering the motion sensors. Scarlet stayed close to Ryan, except for one terrifying incident involving the engine room. She wandered off while Ryan was distracted with Ruby's ventilation adventure. She found her way to engineering and fell asleep on a heat vent. The temperature alarms went off. Engineers panicked, thinking they had a coolant leak. Security was called. Ryan found his smallest hatchling sleeping peacefully, while 20 crew members rushed around trying to diagnose a problem that did not exist. The chief engineer, a massive older dragon named Frost, handed Scarlet back to Ryan with an expression that promised violence if it happened again. Now, Ryan sat in his assigned quarters trying to figure out how to keep 3 curious hatchlings entertained on a warship. The quarters were actually quite nice. There was a proper sleeping nest built into the wall and human amenities like a bed and desk. But nice quarters did not solve the problem of hatchlings who wanted to explore everything. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was a gentle knock, not the aggressive banging he had come to expect from frustrated crew members. Ryan opened the door to find an older dragon waiting patiently. She was smaller than Sarah, with scales that had faded from bright red to a softer pink with age. Her eyes were kind and amused. "I am Grace," she said. Her mental voice was much clearer than the hatchlings. "Sarah thought you might need help." Ryan could have cried with relief. "Yes, please. I have no idea what I am doing." Grace entered the quarters and immediately spotted the 3 hatchlings attempting to build a nest out of Ryan's spare clothes. She made a sound that might have been laughter. "They like you. That is good. Makes training easier when they want to please you." Over the next several hours, Grace taught Ryan the basics of hatchling management. How to channel their curiosity into learning instead of chaos. How to recognize when they were overstimulated and needed quiet time. How to establish boundaries without breaking their trust. She showed him proper feeding techniques. The protein bars were fine as occasional treats, but hatchlings needed more varied nutrition. The ship's galley could provide suitable meals if he asked the right way. She demonstrated games that burned energy while teaching important skills. She explained the developmental stages he could expect over the next few months. Most importantly, she taught him basic Drenid communication. The language was partially telepathic, but also had verbal components. Certain chirps meant specific things. Different growls conveyed different emotions. The position of wings and tail indicated mood and intent. Ryan absorbed everything like a man dying of thirst finding water. Grace was patient, repeating things when he struggled, encouraging him when he got things right. By evening, he could understand the hatchlings much better, and they seemed less frustrated trying to communicate with him. "You're doing well," Grace said as she prepared to leave. "Better than most first-time den parents, actually." Ryan laughed tiredly. "I have caused 3 minor emergencies in 2 days." "Yes, and you will cause several more before you reach Helios 4, Grace said cheerfully. "Hatchlings are contained explosions. Your job is not to prevent the explosion, just to make sure it happens safely." After Grace left, Ryan felt more confident. He could do this. He just needed to learn and adapt and ask for help when necessary. The next few days passed with fewer disasters. Ryan established routines that kept the hatchlings busy. Morning was for learning, with Grace stopping by to teach them basic skills like wing control and temperature regulation. Afternoon was for exploration, but Ryan made sure they explored approved areas with supervision. Evening was for quiet time, stories, and sleep. The stories surprised him. Dragons loved stories, Grace had explained. Hatchlings learned history and values through storytelling. So Ryan told them stories from Earth, about mountains and oceans and animals they had never seen. He told them about his childhood, his parents, his grandmother, who first sparked his love of geology with her rock collection. The hatchlings listened with rapt attention, projecting feelings of curiosity and wonder. They especially loved stories about human children, fascinated by the idea that humans also started small and helpless. Ruby asked questions constantly, wanting to know everything about everything. Crimson noticed details and pointed out inconsistencies in his stories, keeping him honest. Scarlet just snuggled close and purred, content to listen to his voice regardless of the words. Ryan also started learning about dragon culture from various crew members. Most were initially suspicious of the human among them, but they warmed up when they saw how the hatchlings adored him. Dragons valued family above almost everything else, and someone the hatchlings trusted earned respect. He learned about the Red Scale Pack's history, about matriarch Sarah's rise to leadership, about the wars they had fought and the territories they had claimed. He learned about pack bonds and honor codes and the complex social structures that governed dragon society. He learned that accepting the hatchlings meant accepting everything that came with them, their people, their culture, their conflicts. He was not just Ryan Foster anymore. He was Ryan Foster of the Red Scale Pack, and that meant something. On the 5th day, a young warrior named Swift approached him in the corridor. Swift looked nervous, his wings twitching with uncertainty. The others are talking, Swift said quietly.
About you.
About whether a human can truly be red scale. Ryan had expected this. What do you think? Swift looked at the hatchlings playing nearby, chasing each other's tails in circles. I think those hatchlings chose you, and I think our matriarch trusts you. That is enough for me. It was a small thing, one dragon's acceptance, but it felt significant. Ryan was building bridges one interaction at a time. That evening, Sarah summoned him to her quarters. Ryan went nervously, bringing the hatchlings because leaving them behind was not an option. Sarah's quarters were larger and more ornate than his, with perches and nests and displays that showed her achievements. Sit, Sarah invited, gesturing to a cushioned area clearly added for his benefit. Ryan sat. Helios looked like something from a fantasy painting. The red-scale settlement stretched across a mountain range that glowed deep red in the afternoon sun. Parts were carved into the rock. Parts were built on platforms that extended out over steep valleys. Dragons flew between the levels, their wings catching the light as they moved. The architecture blended natural stone with advanced technology in ways that should not have worked, but somehow did. Ryan pressed his face against the transport window, trying to see everything at once. The hatchlings crowded around him, equally curious about their home. Ruby chirped excitedly and flapped her still small wings. Crimson studied the settlement with focused intensity, already mapping it in her mind. Scarlet just pressed against Ryan's side, finding comfort in his presence rather than the view. The landing platform was crowded with dragons waiting to see the human who had saved their matriarch's hatchlings. Ryan felt hundreds of eyes on him as he walked down the transport ramp. He carried his single bag of belongings while 3 baby dragons scrambled around his feet. Sarah waited at the base of the ramp along with Brent and several other important-looking dragons. But there were also younglings, curious adolescents who pushed forward to see the hatchlings and their strange new packmate. Welcome to Helios 4, Sarah said formally. Then more quietly, welcome home. Home. The word felt strange, and right at the same time. Ryan nodded, unsure what to say. The crowd parted as Sarah led them through the settlement. Dragons stared openly, but not with hostility. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to amusement to cautious acceptance. Ryan heard whispered conversations. He felt the weight of attention and tried to project confidence he did not really feel. His new quarters were carved into the mountain itself. A cave dwelling that had been modified with human comforts. There was a bed, a desk, a small kitchen area, and a bathroom that actually fit his size. But there was also a large stone nest built into the wall, heated by thermal vents from deep in the mountain. It was perfectly sized for 3 small dragons, who immediately claimed it. Grace appeared within minutes of their arrival, bringing prepared food and offering to show Ryan around the settlement. They left the hatchlings napping in their new nest and ventured out into the community. The settlement was larger than Ryan had expected, home to several thousand dragons of all ages. Grace pointed out important locations as they walked. The central gathering space where major decisions were made. The flight training grounds where younglings learned to use their wings. The market district where traders from other packs brought goods. And the research facility. A modern complex built into the northern edge of the settlement, equipped with laboratories, computing resources, and equipment that made Ryan's old station look like a toy. The director, an older male named Stone, welcomed him enthusiastically. A human geologist, Stone said, his mental voice carrying genuine excitement. Do you know how rare that is out here? Most humans stay in their own territories. We have been trying to recruit one for years. Stone showed him a personal lab space already set up with basic equipment. This is yours. Request whatever else you need. We have several ongoing geological surveys you might find interesting. The mountain range here has some unique mineral formations that nobody has fully cataloged. Ryan felt excitement building. Real research opportunities. Proper equipment. Interesting projects. This was not exile or obligation. This was opportunity. That evening, Grace helped him prepare for the adoption ceremony. She explained what would happen, what he needed to say, what the ritual meant. Ryan listened carefully and tried not to feel nervous about becoming the center of attention for an entire dragon pack. The ceremony took place at sunset in the central gathering space. The entire settlement seemed to have turned out. Hundreds of dragons arranged in a massive circle. Sarah stood at the center, magnificent in formal armor decorated with the red and gold of her pack. Brent and the other senior warriors flanked her, witnesses to what was about to happen. Ryan walked to the center with the 3 hatchlings following him. The crowd parted silently, all eyes tracking his movement. When he reached Sarah, he stopped and waited, heart pounding. Sarah spoke, her voice amplified somehow so everyone could hear. We gather to witness a pack bond. These hatchlings, Ruby, Crimson, and Scarlet of the Red Scale, have chosen their packmate. They have chosen Ryan Foster, human, as one who protected them when they were helpless, who fed them when they were hungry, who gave them safety when they had none. She paused, letting the words sink in. Among our people, such bonds are sacred. They cannot be forced, only accepted. Ryan Foster, do you accept the responsibility of pack? Do you pledge to protect these hatchlings, to guide them, to stand with them as family? Ryan's voice was steady when he answered. I do. I accept the bond and all that comes with it. Sarah nodded. And, do you accept the Red Scale as your pack? Do you pledge to honor our ways, to stand with us in times of trouble, to be counted among us as family? This was the bigger question. This was permanent. This was everything. Ryan looked at the 3 hatchlings sitting at his feet, looking up at him with absolute trust. He looked at Sarah, who had every reason to hate humans but had chosen understanding instead. He looked at the gathered dragons, some skeptical, some welcoming, all waiting to see what he would choose. I do, Ryan said clearly. I accept the Red Scale as my pack. The crowd erupted in sound. Roars and chirps and mental projections of approval washed over Ryan like a wave. Sarah stepped forward and placed one massive claw on his shoulder. Then, by the authority given to me as matriarch, I name you Ryan Foster, pack brother of the Red Scale. You are one of us. Your enemies are our enemies. Your victories are our victories. Your family is our family. Something happened then that Ryan did not expect. Every dragon in the gathering reached out mentally. Their minds touched his in a brief connection. It was not invasive, just acknowledgement. Hello. Welcome.
Family.
The combined weight of hundreds of minds accepting him nearly drove Ryan to his knees. Then it was over, and the formal part of the ceremony ended. What followed was apparently a celebration. Suddenly there was food and music and dragons coming up to introduce themselves. Ryan shook claws and accepted congratulations and tried to remember names while the hatchlings played with other younglings for the first time in days. Grace found him an hour into the celebration, looking slightly overwhelmed.
You did well, she said.
Better than the last adoption ceremony I witnessed. That one ended with the adoptee running away screaming. Ryan laughed despite himself. I considered it. But you did not. That matters. As the celebration continued into the night, Ryan found a quiet spot on one of the platforms overlooking the valley. The 3 hatchlings found him immediately, climbing onto his lap in their customary pile. They were tired from playing, content to just sit with him and watch the stars. Sarah joined them, settling nearby. Her presence was somehow both companionable and protective. They sat in silence for a while, just existing together. Do you regret it? Sarah asked eventually.